So science and art were very separate parts of my life for a while. I was always a science kid. I bought a telescope when I was in 8th grade. And my first foray into arts was really singing. And I was involved in some musicals and show choir. But I didn't really take dance, like formal dance classes, until I was in grad school at Ohio State pursuing theoretical astrophysics. And then I just kind of dove right in once I had my first class there with the support of the dance professors and the rest of the dance community in Columbus, and really grew into that along with doing my PhD. And I think that was a very important time for me because I was going beyond physics of the facts and learning how physics research is done, specifically theoretical physics research, and also exploring this new world of dance and dance making, and realized that the creative process for both these two fields had very many similarities. So for theoretical physics, you don't know what you're trying to find sometimes. Sometimes you do know what you're trying to find. You have to find some creative ways to look at that and set up situations that you can then investigate. And you use certain parameters, formulas, a framework to investigate that situation you dream up that has some basis in experiment or data, hopefully, sometimes not. And then you kind of take that investigation to its logical conclusion, which is often an objective logical conclusion. So for making dance, you also pose a situation you want to investigate, whether it's a concept or whether it's a situational aspect between two people or more, or some idea that you want to look at, and then you supply your own framework as a choreographer and take your own logical steps to take that through and investigate that to its logical conclusion. And it's going to be a subjective logical conclusion as opposed to an objective one, because you can change things as you go based on how you are as a choreographer. But those two creative processes do share some similarities, and they can help inform each other. And it was when I was a professor at Ohio Wesleyan is when I first started thinking about how to kind of integrate science and dance. And part of it was when I was up in the front of the classroom and I was teaching intro physics. I would kind of move around a lot and get students to understand more about how kinetics work and mechanics work by doing certain things with myself, like conservation of angular momentum, where I'd start it like this and go in like this and go faster. They would actually see me do that at the front of the room. So when I saw a TED Talk where a scientist used dancers instead of PowerPoint to explain some science stuff that's going on, I was like, well, why don't I try doing that? And I'd been dancing with the dance company in Columbus, Takes and Dance, and I'd been doing all this physics stuff with the students, and also dancing in university productions. And I said, why don't I try to get some of the dancers to do an experiment with me? And so I recruited 9 dancers and the dance professor, actually. Let me go in here. And said, why don't I try some experiment where I'm going to give a lecture about the history of the universe from the Big Bang until now, talking about how the universe is expanding, everything that goes with that. And I'm going to have the dancers illustrate this in a public lecture where I'm talking, but they're going to be doing all these different concepts and moving around to get across the points I'm trying to make about the universe. So I wrote this big script, and while I was writing the script, generated for a general audience, I also had choreography in mind of like, okay, the dancers can do this, they can do this, we'll think about something here, and kind of go through that exploration. And then when I was in the studio with those brave dancers with me, saw some things that worked and some things that didn't. And it was kind of a back and forth process at that point where I realized that the science couldn't solve all the dance problems, and the dance aspects couldn't answer all the science questions that I was trying to get out there. So there were some certain aspects that definitely came across. One was, well, I could have them do shapes. So I could have them do, a spiral galaxy, for example, just actually using that kind of shape and moving in that way to get across what that is. Or I could say, now you're going to be all galaxies moving through space. So I'm going to give you that intention to do that. How are you as a dancer going to take that and move that through space and get that idea across? Or for some more abstract things, at the beginning of the universe, when everything was at one place for the Big Bang, it's kind of really abstract, right? How do you get that across? If I say there's a whole bunch of energy here and you're all together, what are you guys going to do to express that? What are you guys going to do to get that idea across? And the dancers had fun also coming up with different things to do for that. They told me that, especially at the first rehearsal, they were really confused because this was a whole new thing, it was different. But then as they understood more of the science and more of why I was having them do certain things, they could really get into it. And they could embody certain aspects of that more. And actually, they could have more fun with it. They could do a little bit more acting with regard to that. I'm going to show a little bit here once I get to it. So at one point in the universe, in the history of the universe, you have protons and neutrons that come together to form nuclei, and the electrons are floating around, and you have photons, particles of light, that are also out there. The electrons would love to actually bond with the nuclei to make neutral atoms, but the photons have so much energy that they keep on breaking them apart. And so what I had the students do here was some of them were protons, some of them were neutrons, some were electrons, and some were photons. And I said, well, why don't you try to do this and try to break each other apart and see if you can get this idea across. So I let them go. I said, hey, do this. I'm going to keep talking about the process, but you can go ahead and express this. And the people that were watching, when I asked for feedback later, they really got the idea of what was going on with this. And they could really say, I see these particles doing these things. I can see how this works, and I understand it. So eventually, by the way, as the universe keeps expanding, the energy of the photons goes down, so they can't break apart the electrons from the nuclei, and they end up joining together to make neutral atoms. And then the electrons and the photons can go through space, and she's very happy that she can now actually just leave and not deal with the electrons. So I learned a lot from this, especially with talking with the people that watched it and the dancers as they were involved, and also with myself as to how this actually would work. And in going through this and trying to get across these ideas, I realized that science can give motivation, intention for why you're trying to do something you're trying to explore, and a context for something to create dance about. And you can have different stylistic elements and actions that you would have from the science that would then make their way into the dance. And you could also have the dance giving a different connection with the audience with regard to the science, getting them to understand a bit more about what the science is, visually, physically, and socially. Because when you see those humans up there interacting, you can put yourself in that spot. And you realize, oh wait, they're a proton, oh wait, they're a photon, and they're having these sort of interactions. Or that's a galaxy in different galaxies. They can kind of relate more to what's going on because they can see that social context, see that social construct, and connect with that more. And I realized that was a bit powerful that way. Another important point is that there were some very heavy science students that were watching this. And they learned about dance from this too. Because a lot of them said, oh, I think dance just conveys emotions. But now they could see from this, and I was kind of surprised a number of them put this down, that they see dance can do a lot more complex things than just what they thought stereotypically dance was. And I was very glad they could learn from that too. So at the end of this, I also made a 2-minute modern dance piece based on the different shapes, the different intentions, the different moods and qualities that we generated through making this dance. And that's more of the integration of a science and dance project, and that's what I'm working on now too, with regard to Arcadia, actually, as Lucy was talking about. There actually is going to be a dance taking place prior to the stage reading of Arcadia that I've been making along with 2 collaborators. And it's based on the mathematical idea of iteration that Lucy has told you about. And when I say based on, I mean inspired by and also using. So this process, and I'll start showing you a little bit of this here. So iteration, by the way, Lucy gave us some great description about it. The mathematical process, you have some kind of thing you're trying to investigate. You have an initial guess, and you have a formula that's not quite right, but it gets at it somehow, but it's too complicated to actually have the right formula for it. So you put your initial guess into the formula, and you get an answer. And then you take that answer as your new initial guess, your new input, and run it through the formula again, maybe tweaking the formula to see if you can get it better this time, and get a new answer, and keep on doing that over and over again. So I said, why can't I do this for dance? So I recorded a bit of, get to it, like a minute long, or a 2-minute long phrase. And by the way, that is, let me actually zoom in here. That's if you can't see that with the light, that's a stack of paper in front of me. And why don't I create something that's sort of kind of simple with regard to movement and send that to a collaborator and then say, okay, now you take my ending point as your starting point and take some of the context of what I did, take some of the movement that I did, but also tweak it so that it's based on your choreographic sensibility and get to a new ending. So let me just quickly go ahead here slightly. Where It's not going to let me, so we'll just go through. So I sent this to my collaborator in Ohio. I said, hey, okay, you do this, and you make something. And see if it's different than mine, see how it evolves, but start where I ended and take that through. And so it's been an interesting process to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and see how we keep influencing each other, how this tweaks, how this evolves, and what we're converging towards. And build part of the dance out of that, and then create more of the dance based on all the different parts that we have gone through to get to this place. And it's been quite the interesting investigation, and I'm excited to actually be able to show this on June 29th in the West Court of the National Academy of Sciences main building, whereas the stage reading is going to be in the auditorium. Then this is going to be in the West Court, which I'm not exactly sure how you describe where it is, but it's nearby there. It's a beautiful room, high ceilings, and it just makes you want to dance in it, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this there. But those are the different kind of aspects with regard to science and dance that I've been investigating, and seeing how science can influence dance and see what you can learn from each other and how you can kind of enhance both by exploring them. So thank you very much.